Let's get creative with the 117 ScrawlrBox.
Hey Scrawlers, I'm Kat from ScrawlrBox and welcome back to another video. Today I've got the 117 ScrawlrBox again, but we're going to get into some of those tips and tricks as seen in the zine. Let's get into it.
A little reminder of what was inside: a set of pastel pencils, some PastelMat paper from Conté, artwork from Helen Jones, a pastel sharpener, Scrawlr sticker, and of course the Scrawlr zine. And as with every month, this zine is full of handy tips and tricks on how to use this month's supplies, as well as some handy tips and tricks from the artist himself. Let's try some out now, shall we? I'll be using the PastelMat paper as provided in the box. It's a lovely sand coloured surface with a good grit to it. A few extras: a pot for the pencil sharpenings, and I'll also be using the tissue paper from the box. I'm going to use this to lean on to prevent any smudging while I work. Okay, let's begin. I'm going to start with the grey to do my outline. I realised I forgot to film this bit. However, I did what I always do. I'll do a sketch, I'll tidy it up, and then I'll trace my own work back onto my final paper. That way I get nice neat lines to work with. I've also marked out any areas of shading too, and I'm going to add a border to use later. Erasing any unwanted lines, which didn't work as well as I'd like, but it will be okay. On to the colouring bit, and we're going to start with white. Starting with our lightest colour, we're going to work in light layers. So I'm pressing quite softly for this layer, and I'm gradually going to build up more and more of the colour as we go along. I'm also working my pencil in one direction. This will make it easier to blend as all the pigment is going in the same direction. As you can see, I've already started using the tissue paper to rest my hand on. This should keep my outline underneath intact. On to my next two colours. I've got the reddish brown and yellow. So I'm going to work this in the same way I did the white. Nice, soft, light layers in the areas I want to build up, making sure I'm using the pencil in one direction again. It's quite a slow process, but I found this quite relaxing. I'm not blending anything in here just yet. This is just building up my first colours to then go in and blend afterwards. First stage complete, and you can still see that paper peeking through. On to my next layer, and this is where we're going to be doing a bit more blending. I'll be using the colours in the same direction again, layering them on top of each other and using that white to blend all of the colours into each other. I'll just do the top part of the wings first, then we can see a comparison. Not using any blending tools for this, just using the pencils by sweeping them into each other in the same direction. Now we're going to build up a bit more definition and contrast with the darker brown. Looking good so far. It's got a lot of dust on it, so I'm just going to tap that off on the side and carry on. Keeping my pencils nice and sharp, as this is quite a small drawing and I need to get into those little nooks and crannies. So I'm just going to repeat this process with my colours, using the white, then the yellow, then the reddish brown and the dark brown to build up all of those areas. I also started peppering dots in just for a bit more visual interest with the brown. By not using any blending tool, I've got a bit more of a rough blend to it, so it looks a bit more organic. You can see those swipey textures, which is what I quite like. On to the next section of the wings, and I'll be using more of the darker brown as I want these parts of the wings to look darker because they lay underneath the other ones. Gives it a little bit more dimension. There's not too much fallout of pigment as the paper tends to grip onto it. However, when there is, I do just tap that off and I make sure my pencils are sharpened throughout. coming together quite nicely, but I still feel like it looks a bit flat. So I'm going to be adding in the black just to build up a bit more contrast. Erasing off the edges just to neaten them up a little bit before moving on to the outline of the face. I'm going to use the black pencil to do this, but I didn't realise my hands were dirty before I started, so I've made a little smudge there. That's okay, it erases out easily, and then I just went and washed my hands. I decided to keep this bit a bit more simple as the moth has all the detail, and I quite like the idea of that. I'm about to do a little experiment, so I'm being sensible and I'm finding a clean bit of the tissue paper just to cover up that moth so it definitely doesn't be infected by this. Using my black pastel pencil, I'm going to scribble on this bare piece of paper. That way it should create some nice pigment bits. That's the technical word, right? I'm then going to use this dust and paint it on to my shadows using a dry paintbrush. By scribbling onto normal paper, I'm not collecting a huge amount of pigment, but that's what I'm aiming for. I just want a soft, subtle shadow. And by using a soft, dry paintbrush, I shouldn't really form any too harsh edges, which again is what I'm looking for. And it did work quite well, although the grit of the paper and the soft paintbrush weren't really that friendly to each other, so it did take a while to work it into the page, but I really like the way it turned out. So this was really good for building the lightest of light layers with a really soft finish. Adding my lines back in, and then onto the background, which I wanted to do differently again, so this is going to be a solid block of colour. There was lots of pigment fallout for this as I was pressing quite hardly to make sure all of the paper tooth was filled. Adding in a border to my background because I feel like that white's going to really make it pop. Yep, love how that looks. Still felt it needed a little bit more definition, so I went back over a few lines and added the dooley-dally things in. They probably have a real name too. And here she is. I'm really happy I didn't actually add in more detail to that face. I feel like the simplicity of it brings out the moth more. Finishing off by stealing Chris's hairspray to do a really super light layer to fix it.
And there we have it, the 117 ScrawlrBox tips and tricks complete. I hope you found this video useful and maybe you learned something new. I definitely learned something new. Pastel pencils aren't really my thing. Give it a good go, and it was lots and lots of fun. And all thanks to our featured artists, really useful step by step. If you've got the zine and you're subscribed, I thoroughly recommend you go and check out that step by step. Perfect. Thank you, Helen. Until next time, keep scrolling.
Thank you for watching. If you made it this far, give a little brown heart emoji. Cheers then.